Good evening. We'd like to welcome you to another one of our live streams. Let's talk about it. I really want to share my appreciation to each of you all who join us every week to talk about things that are relevant to children and that are relevant to making your families much, much better. My name is Dr. Willie Miles. I am the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children's Foundation located in Atlanta, Georgia. And oftentimes we don't talk very much about the foundation, but we believe that the foundation is an organization that's critically needed for these days and times. Our mission is very simple: to make children our priority. You know, in many years past, we thought oftentimes that if we made the families better, we help the children. And that still exists. But my focus is really to help the children, and hopefully they can make the families better. Our goal is to make sure that families have basic information on parenting and really understand what the parenting role is all about. One of our goals is also to be a resource to foster parents throughout the United States, making things very practical for them when it comes to raising children who are in foster care and understanding children who are in foster care and understanding their diagnosis and understanding the things they've gone through in life. And, oftentimes as foster parents, we think that we have it all together, and realistically we don't. We are sort of like learning day by day because each child brings a different experience. Each child brings a different experience. I do want to share that we have two more live streams left for this series. This is called our Children's Mental Health Series. March 2nd, we had What is ADHD and Its Causes. March 9th, we had Oppositional Defiant. My Child Does Not Respect Anyone. What is that all about? March 16th, which is today, our topic is depression and anxiety, and what are the differences, what are the symptoms. On next week, March 23rd, hyperactivity. How do I control it? And do children always need medication? And the last one for the series will be post-traumatic stress disorders. What are the causes and what are the symptoms? That is on March 30th. So we have a packed month full of children's mental health. I will also attempt to make this relevant to adults who may have some of the same diagnosis and some of the same symptoms. I do want to wish Jackie, who's my co-host, Clintus, a happy birthday. She's celebrating tonight, so she deserves the time off, and you guys have to deal with me tonight. What trouble are we going to have? But I do want to thank you all for being here. I do have a surprise host coming up for y'all. Wait, it's not a surprise. I'm going to tell you who it is. I think Stephen Turner may tune in with us tonight and actually assist me tonight, maybe around 7:30. We'll see what happens. And if not, I will just continue to move forward like we always have done. I do want to share that the foundation is a 501c3 organization, which simply means that any donations to us are tax deductible. I want to share that we do not accept any fees whatsoever, because what we're doing is a public service. However, I do want to make ourselves available to you so you can donate to us if you'd like to. Of course, any funds we get goes right back into the community. So I'm not looking to get a paycheck out of this right here. My whole point is to make sure that we're sustaining ourselves, and that I want to make sure that you feel like you have a part of us. So many of the foster parents who are getting the training, we don't charge you anything, but we'd like to ask you to consider us sometimes for a donation when you have some extra cash. And again, the way to make those donations is go to our website. It is thechildrensfoundation.net. And click on donation, and you'll see how to donate to us. Again, go to thechildrensfoundation.net, which is our website, and click on the donate button, and you can donate to us. We believe that the Children's Foundation belongs to you, the community. And guess what, folks? We're very excited about that. We're very excited about that. We have some great things that are coming up throughout the year. We're planning a conference, well, not a conference, but really a workshop in the month of April, where you can actually click in, go to several of the breakout rooms and get some great information. We try to make sure that our live streams are relevant to your everyday life. Because having these live streams and just talking to the audience, what purpose is that if it's not relevant to you? What purpose is information if it's not relevant. It's much like children going to school each day and not being able to apply what they're learning to everyday life. And that's why school sometimes is so boring to children. It's not relevant to their everyday life. So my goal is to make sure that what we do here is relevant to our everyday life. So what it is really is life 101. So for our children's mental health series is mental health for children 101. Again, our goal is not to make you therapists or practitioners. Our goal is to just give you some basic information so you're not surprised by anything and that you're intelligent and you're aware of your children's diagnosis and how the diagnosis came about and the whole process of getting therapy. It's kind of interesting. Our world is in such I'm not saying it's in a bad state. I think it's just life. And we find ourselves sometimes just being very stressed about everything. It's kind of hard to be happy if, rent is due and you have no job. The light bill is due, utilities are due, everything is due, and folk are saying that you ought to be happy. Well, on a spiritual side, you really should be happy because you are still alive. But I think there's just too many people and too many adults who are not able to manage their lives. And they find themselves in a emotional state that requires a diagnosis, that requires medication. Something meaning that oftentimes we're not equipped to handle the stressors of life. Yes, this is about children's mental health, and I'll get to that in a few minutes, but I've been just led to talk to the parents and the adults who are on now. What I'm finding each day when I practice is that oftentimes adults have mental health issues because they are attempting to control something that they can't control. It's kind of amazing that we sometimes are control freaks. We want to control everything. And then we find ourselves having depression, anxiety, all kinds of other symptoms because we find ourselves not being able to control things that we're not supposed to be controlling. We find ourselves also in situations where we're trying to help people and we end up bearing other people's burdens. I'm not saying don't be helpful. What I am saying, we find ourselves in a mental health disarray because we're trying to control things that we have no business trying to control. And what I tell my clients daily is that if you want to be stable and if you want to have a good mental health, control only those things that you can control. And the only thing that you can control is yourself. And if you control yourself, you're doing a whole lot. How does one control themselves? Well, think about your career. What does you want to do? Controlling yourself. Your thoughts, you control it. How you treat people, you control it. How much progress you make, you control it. So I think that if we focus on ourselves and stop trying to control things we have no business controlling or trying to control, we'd be much better off. It's just like me saying the sun is shining outside and I want it to rain. And I get upset every day because the rain isn't coming. Then I get frustrated because the rain isn't coming. Well, I don't control the weather. So why am I trying to control it? My point is that we get so caught up and so entangled in drama and sometimes mess that we're not even supposed to be involved in. We can't control things and we can't control people. And if we get that in our minds, we be doing great. If we get that in our minds, we be doing great. So this was just a little tidbit for you all, because for the month I have been talking about children's mental health, but I also think that I need to slip in a little bit just for the parents, because I want to share with you parents. Sometimes we cause the issues in our children. We cause them to have issues by either giving too much or not giving enough. So again, I'm just really hopeful that all of you all are in a good place. I'm just hopeful that you all are in a good place. I'm just really hopeful that you take the little advice I'm giving you is try to control things that you control and stop trying to control things you don't control. You don't control people. So you can't control your husband or your wife. You can't control your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You can't control your partner. So stop trying to. Your life will be a whole lot better. Another thing that we get so involved in adult mental health is that we worry about stuff. We just worry about stuff. And the thing about worrying about things is that worrying can be good for us, but it also can be bad. It's just like saying anything in excess is not good for us. Anything in excess is not good for us. And what I'm finding out with many mental health issues, with some, especially the moods, is we're not having a good diet, and we're not getting exercise, and we're not taking care of ourselves physically. So therefore, we move into a state of mental crises. And of course, when we're not happy. Okay. So I'm not minimizing our backgrounds. I'm not minimizing things that have happened to us. I'm not minimizing traumas. I'm just talking about how we can make ourselves much better if we focus on ourselves. And some folks say, well, guess what? To focus on me is selfish. No, to focus on you is good. Because if you don't focus on you, who else will focus on you? All right. I saw Faithful Father chime in. And if you will, Faithful Father, if you choose to, I sent you an email and you can actually request to join me live and we'll get started on children's mental health. Someone asked me about, do I have an opinion on Kirk Franklin and his son? And I guess it's talking about children's mental health. But his son is not a child. And my opinion on it is that I think people ought to let people handle their own private business and stop being so judgmental and stop trying to judge other folk when our house is in a mess. I think if we look at our own homes and our own children, our own situations, we have enough to deal with that than someone else's situation. I can share a thought, and the thought is that, guess what? That's between he and his son. It happened over years. It's about relationships, about parent relationships with their children. And as children get older, folk, you can't make them be anything that you want them to be. And so you need to stop trying. Oftentimes parents try to make up for some past stuff and they feel guilty and they keep trying to make this person love them. Love. You can't control whether someone loves you or not. So why even try? You can't control whether someone loves you or not. So why even try? Faithful Father, it was no stress upon you. Hey, you're driving. We'll see you when you get here. We're good. So, and that's sort of a good question, not so much about Kirk Franklin, but about parent relationships with their children and when their children get older. Some parents feel very guilty about things that have happened in the past, and they overcompensate when the child gets old, and the child still has issues. He's an adult child, still has issues. So parents still try to make sure they treat them nicely and give them excessively and lay themselves before their children who they want to love them. Well, my thought is you better try to live your life and let your son or daughter deal with their own situations and recommend therapy for them. Because evidently, if they're holding something against you, they need some help. They need some help. So, folks, I want to get into our topic for tonight. I do want to share again, please consider donating to us and know that we are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization located in Atlanta, Georgia. However, we're helping people everywhere. We're helping people everywhere. So tonight's topic is about depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety. It's kind of interesting that that is where we are tonight because it's a very interesting topic, a very interesting topic. And what I find is that many adults like children, go through depression and anxiety. And one of the issues, one of the questions often that people oftentimes have is like, what is depression really all about? And where does this stuff come from? And give me some background. Before, guess what? I want to share with y'all that about 4.4 million children between the ages of 3 to 17 years old have had a diagnosis with anxiety. I know y'all are saying, well, what are they going through? It's not just what they are going through. It's also what you have gone through. About 4.4 million children have been diagnosed with anxiety. Let's see the number, about 1.9 million children have been diagnosed with depression. That's a lot of children. And the question is, how does this happen? Like, what are they anxious about? And why are they depressed? They're not paying any bills. Why are they depressed? They're not wanting for anything. Why are they depressed? Before we get into that, I want to talk about kind of like why this occurs, why it occurs. So we have this many children, millions of children who are diagnosed with anxiety. And we have 1.9 children who are diagnosed with depression. An estimated 17 million adults in the United States have at least one major depressive episode. 17.3 million adults have at least one major depressive episode. At least there are about 19.1 million folk who have this disorder, and it's prevalent. So what does that mean? That means, one, is that the number is consistent and people are not doing well with handling situations. They're not doing well with handling situations. Oftentimes when we hear about depression and we hear about anxiety, we start thinking about older people. The reason they got anxiety because they're old, right? The reason they got depression because they've been through a whole lot. Well, it really has very little to do with age, because we're talking about children's mental health. So these children are not old. But the question is, what is the difference between depression and anxiety? What is the difference between depression and anxiety? But what's very interesting about these two is that they usually travel together. Anxiety or depression and anxiety, quite prevalent in children. And one question is like, well, where did it come from? What did I do wrong? Is it hereditary? Did my husband, is that in my husband's genes, or is it in my wife's genes? So we're trying to figure out, how in the world can children be depressed, and how can they have anxiety? Well, depression is usually a long-term condition. And depression is when a person feels just sad all the time. And it sort of affects children from being children, from doing activities. And you can tell when a child is depressed, they usually look sad all the time, or they have flat affect, means that they're expressionless. And they also don't want to play with other children. And they just don't want to do anything. And they oftentimes are overwhelmed with sadness, and they cry a lot. Does it sound familiar with some children you know? They're just always sad. And when you ask them what's wrong with them, they can't tell you what is wrong with them. Depression for children is very similar to when adults are depressed. When adults are depressed, adults describe this as going into this dark place. And the more depressed they get, the darker the place gets. And they give an analogy of in a sinking hole, and they go deeper with depression. And they get to a point where the way out looks a long ways up, and the light they saw to get out has diminished. So they're in total darkness, which means they have hit rock bottom. And that's when they're usually manic depressed. Usually they stay in this depression for 3 to 5 days. Some clients have stayed in it for weeks. And when clients stay into a depressive mode for weeks, of course, they shouldn't say that. They shouldn't stay that long. After 7 days, I then begin to worry. We're talking about hospitalization. That means they're in a dark place. They can't get out. And guess what? Children experience the same thing. When I'm talking about children, people, I'm not talking about just 3-year-olds. I'm talking about from 3 to age 17. So I'm going to use that as my descriptor. They get in dark places and they can't get out. And the more they try to get out, the deeper they get. And the deeper they get, the darker their life becomes. And the darker their life becomes, the less they want to engage in life. And the less they want to engage in life, the less they want to live. Depression. Depression is a weight on adults. But people, it's also a weight on children. And you're asking, like, where did it come from? I'll get to that in a few minutes. Like, where does all this come from? How is a child depressed? What happened to make him or her depressed? So keep that in mind, what depression is. Anxiety is. Anxiety stems from an ongoing traumatic situation. It is an emotional response that manifests itself in many ways. Some symptoms. Children who are easily agitated. They usually say, I feel dizzy. They constantly have a fear and they constantly worry. They have self-doubt and severe extreme mood swings. Now, I'm talking about the child now, not the adult, not you. The child. Easily agitated. Everything just frustrates them. Lightheadedness or dizziness. Constant fear or worrying. The constant fear could be, I can't sleep in my room at night because I see or hear things, which are psychoses. The constant fear is somebody's going to jump in my window and kidnap me. The constant fear is that you're going to leave me somewhere and not come back and get me. So I have to have you in my eyes view at all times. A constant fear is, I don't think I can do anything. I'm worthless. A constant fear is extreme mood swings. And the thing about it is that these kinds of symptoms can be triggered by anything. And the person who's experienced, the child who's experiencing it, they sort of think, they don't think it, but they feel like they're relieving a traumatic experience. And sometimes this happens, well, not sometimes, oftentimes it happens with, of course, trauma. It happens with incest. It happens with any kind of neglect and abuse. Any kind of neglect and abuse. So this is how children, how these two diagnoses manifest in children. Depression is, I'm always sad. Everything is gloomy. I'm never happy. Sometimes just whining. And the depression in children gets worse, just like adults. It gets worse, till the child is totally antisocial. Don't want to be around anybody. Probably wants to cling around you, the parent, a whole lot. And you may say, he or she's not acting like a child. They're always so sad. What has happened to them? Well, that is depression. The question is, are these diagnoses common in children? I already gave you the stat on it. The answer is yes. And are they common with adults? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. But as I'm giving you this information, I want you to know also that, there are answers to all of this, and both of these diagnoses can be treated. But, let's just talk a little bit about how they get there. Like, how does a child become hopeless? How does a child sink into a dark place? How does a child not want to go on? And my answer is the same way when you go into a depression. Just start thinking about it. When you get depressed, and you say, I don't know why I'm depressed. I just feel like I'm in a dark place, and nothing makes me happy. Nothing is wrong. I can't pinpoint anything that I'm depressed about. I just don't feel good. And folk, we're all human. We all have those days. I have those days. I'm able to say that, guess what? I'm getting depressed and I don't know why. Then I began to self-treat, not with medication. I began to self-treat with asking myself questions. What went on the last 3 days? What issue do I have that's unresolved? Why am I depressed? You see, we're able to talk ourselves through it, but children don't ask themselves, what did I do in the last 3 days? They don't ask themselves, why am I depressed? For a matter of fact, the child doesn't even know they're depressed. These are adult observations, and they become eventually clinical. So what happens to that child who is depressed? What happens to that child who does have anxiety? I'm going to share that the situation worsens if treatment is not sought. The situation worsens if treatment is not sought. I'm going to share with you, for those who are foster parents, the children that you get are usually going to be, they're going to have anxiety, they're going to have some signs of depression, along with other diagnoses. And folk, I want to share with you, you may not see these diagnoses manifest. Like you may not see the child being isolated and not feeling good about himself and always whiny and always sad, because those behaviors will manifest other ways. So it's important that you kind of like suspect this. If you get a child who is, and not just foster children, it's any child who has gone through abandonment. Abandonment simply means mom has grandmama raising him or her. A mom has auntie raising them. Children experience that loss when they're not with natural parents. And so don't forget now, this is Mental Health 101, not trying to make clinicians out of you, but I want to make sure you understand that. Don't say, well, I don't see any signs of depression. He's just playing around with me. I don't see any signs of anxiety. He's just playing. Just work with me. Any child who's gone through neglect and or abuse are going to show some signs or shall be manifested in some other behaviors of anxiety and depression. And I shared with some of you who had just signed on that those two hang around together. Anxiety and depression, they hang around together. So I'm going to describe them again because I want to make sure you all get this. Depression is where the person begins to feel hopeless. They feel they're in a dark hole. And if you can just imagine yourself in a dark hole, and at the top of the hole, when you start out, you see a lot of light, right? The deeper you sink, the light begins to diminish. That means the deeper the depression is. The depression gets very, very deep. For adults, you become manic depressed. And manic depressed is when you start crying and don't have any reason for crying. And the child cries for no reason for crying. So some of the symptoms are very, very similar. I'm going to say they're just developmental. So the child cries, don't know why he cries. The adult cries and says, why am I crying? That's the difference. Child gets depressed. He doesn't say what causes depression. He just knows he doesn't feel good. Adult gets depressed. They say, what caused this? And not only what caused this, but how do I get out of this thing? Child has depression. He doesn't say how do I get out of it. He just feels stuck. He or she just feels stuck there. And so that's why it takes caring adults to bring them back out of the depression. And sometimes, folk, it's going to take medication to help with that. It's going to take medication to help with that. So we talked about the history of depression. We said that at least 4 million children have been diagnosed with depression, with anxiety. About 1.9 million have been diagnosed with depression. For adults, 17 million adults have been diagnosed with at least one major depressive episode. And anxiety, about 19.1 million folk have been diagnosed with it. The question some people had is this diagnosis common for children? I answered that already. Yes, it is. And we talked about some of the causes of depression and anxiety. And I sort of gave you some examples, but other examples are strong fears may appear at different times during development. Of course, children and human beings go through the stages of development. So according to what stage the child is in will determine what kind of symptoms he or she may exhibit. Toddlers are often distressed about being away from their parents, even if they're safe and cared for. So parents, it's very important that your toddlers stop screaming at them. Stop saying, shut up, you know I'm coming back. I don't know what you're crying for. Shut up. People, just reassure them. Reassure them. Mommy has to go to work. Daddy has to go to work. We're going to be back. We're not going to forget about you. We're going to even call the daycare throughout the school to make sure you're okay. You have to do those kind of things. My thought is that what if you were, put yourself in the child's place. Get out on your knees and look at all these big things around you, all these big people and big buildings. And you think I'm supposed to be comfortable with all that? Everything's bigger than I am. The world is a scary place in the eyes of a child. And it takes reassuring adults to let them know everything's going to be okay. Just think about it. Folks, I'm sure many of you all are from metropolitan cities. I'm in Atlanta. When I go downtown, I used to work downtown Atlanta, where the skyscrapers are. And folks, when I used to walk past those skyscrapers, I used to say, look how small I am in this big old world. Look how small I am. And just think if you were a child and have these things towering around you, and all these adults are towering around you, and all you want is the security of someone who loves you, which are your parents. They can't get it from anyone else. Others can try. That's why your children, when you get back to the daycare center, they rush into your arms. They're happy to see you, but they're glad you came back for them. That's the reassurance they need. That's the reassurance they need. What causes these things? I mentioned that trauma can cause some of these things also. And we're talking about children between the ages of 3 to 17 years of age. And their traumas will be manifested developmentally. Okay. So, what causes depression? Loss, separation, abuse, shouting at the child all the time, screaming at them all the time, a toxic environment. You already know that, did you? You know that how you live, the children's behavior, the children will respond to it. Have y'all met some houses where they're always screaming? It's always just everybody is fussing and cussing and I've seen some of that. What they're doing is going to create a child who is depressed or a child who is anxious. Some symptoms of anxiety is when the child is very afraid. It's kind of interesting about the anxiety because you can tell when the anxiety appears because they are afraid of everything. And they're always fidgeting, they're always jumpy. If any loud noise occurs, it scares them. And they also are afraid of things. You're like, wait a minute, why are you so afraid of this toy? And the toy may remind them of something that was scary. Symptoms of anxiety. In children who have anxiety, sometimes they have phobias. And phobias, of course, are things that you cannot see that the child may hear. For instance, the child may say, I hear voices, or when I'm asleep, I hear somebody talking to me, or I saw something. And the key, parents, is for you not to get so excitable and start getting scared. What you need to do is to comfort the child and reassure them that all is well. Reassure them that no one's coming in this room, because I'm protecting you. And if those phobias continue to exist, it's going to be important that you seek additional help for the child. Because if he or she is crying every night and it goes on for 7 days and it doesn't seem to stop, that means that there's some other things that are happening that probably needs medical attention. When the child's afraid of, we're talking about anxiety, folks. When the child's afraid of school and other places where people are, and we call it social anxiety. When they should be on the playground, they're afraid to go and play. They're afraid to play on the swing. They're afraid to play on the carousel. They're afraid to play on the swing. They're just afraid of everything. This is how anxiety manifests itself in children. And, ready, adults also. We're talking about this developmentally. So whatever I'm sharing with you for the child, you better ask yourself, am I experiencing that? If you are, seek help. Also, children who have anxiety are very worried. They're very worried about the future and about bad things. I had a case of a young boy who was 8 years old who has anxiety, and severe anxiety, and what he would do, he would always think that his parents would not have enough money for to pay the bills. Hey, Stephen, how are you doing?
Hey, sir, how you doing?
Hey, I'm glad you're on. Great. He would
I'm fine.
he would always be
Thanks.
afraid. He would always be afraid of his parents not having enough money. Now, his parents never told him this. So he would always be worried about if grandma was going to die. But she wasn't sick. But he was always worried about adult things. And they would say, why is he always into our business? And where he's getting this stuff from? Well, that child has anxiety, which simply means that he's unsure about things that are going to happen. And it's usually called general anxiety because he's all over the board. He is afraid of you're moving. He's afraid of mom and dad separating. He's afraid of a brother getting sick. He or she comes with all these things they can worry about. And guess what, parents? You don't have to do anything to cause that. They just are worriers. Now, parents, as we're talking about children, Stephen, we're talking about adults too now. So adults, if you find yourself in this situation, you're experiencing anxiety. Also, they have repeated episodes of sudden, unexpected, intense fear, which means they get scared all of a sudden, they start crying. When that starts occurring, folks, it's anxiety. It's anxiety. All right. So at this point, Stephen, I know you had anxiety driving, didn't you?
I did, because I'm trying to listen, and Doc, I'm talking and thinking as you're talking because I'm recalling certain things that I went through as a child, and I'm like, wow, he is right on time.
Well, here's something I was sharing, Stephen, that for those who don't know, Stephen, introduce yourself.
My name is Stephen Turner, and I'm a husband of 24 years, a father of 4 wonderful children, and I recruit foster and adoptive families with the Division of Family and Children Services.
All right, and some of your folk are on tonight. So, but I was saying that as you said, you were thinking, Stephen, that's exactly what I want parents to do. As I'm giving these symptoms, I want them to think about themselves, because guess what, Stephen? Some of these parents have the same symptoms of anxiety and depression, and they're not being treated. They're not being treated. And in one of our episodes, I want to deal with getting up the stereotypes of receiving mental health services. And I wish we could call it something else like life coaching or something. But, for the DSM-5 book, we have to make sure we're using medical terms since we are a medical profession.
Right.
So, but people are afraid when they hear like mental health. Oh my God, I recall Pawpaw when he had schizophrenia. Well, that was Pawpaw, But
Right.
I just think we all would be in a much better place if we received some sort of counseling. And Stephen, guess what? Our children would be in a whole much better place if parents were to seek some sort of help.
That is correct. And so would we.
Yep. Exactly. Well, I'm not afraid. As I say, I ain't ashamed, because it was the best thing that could ever happen to me. It changed my life completely. Sometimes, let's just stay here for a second. Sometimes we hover around in mental health. You say, oh, guess what? We'll just deal with it by and by, or we'll just let it go. And folks will find out that we really never let it go. We never let it go. Stephen, even let's talk about anxiety a little bit further. Even with your kids going back to school in the midst of COVID, there's some anxiety with parents, aren't there?
Yes, there is. Yes,
Yeah,
there is.
let's talk about it. Like what kind of things the anxiety parents have with their kids going back to school?
Wondering if they're going to actually get coronavirus. Are they
Exactly.
going to be exposed to the virus?
Mhm.
Those are certainly, Dr. Miles, some of the things that I have thought about. And my children all have the opportunity to go back. But guess what? The parents have said, no, we're going to continue with virtual learning.
Yeah. And I wanted Stephen to share that to let you know how easy it is to have anxiety. Now, we're not saying that that all anxiety is bad. The issue is that when it's uncontrolled,
Correct.
and when it lasts more than 7 days, and you find yourself getting worse and worse, with anxiety. That it started out me just wondering about stuff. Now I'm crying. Now I'm fearful. Now I'm socially isolating. A whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
other things are going on.
Mm-hmm.
These are the same kinds of things that happens with children. Stephen, children also experience anxiety by sleep habits. They don't sleep well at night, or they don't sleep throughout the night. They have physical symptoms like fatigue. They have headaches, stomach aches. If your child is constantly complaining about headaches, stomach aches, he or she may be experiencing some anxiety. The key about anxiety is that children worry. And the only way they won't worry is if you reassure them. It's the same thing with you adults. What causes you not to worry? Reassurance. Reassurance. Right? So I know we're going kind of fast, and the whole goal is to give you a 101 on this and to talk about like why it occurs and how it occurs. I think I gave you some information already on depression. If I didn't, please let me know. But depression, again, it causes children to feel helpless. It causes them to feel like there's no help there, and they find themselves sinking deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. It's the same symptoms that adults have. Except children cannot communicate what's happening. Adults can. For some who just joined, Stephen, I said the other day, I said, I'm feeling depressed. I don't know why though. And so at least I'm self-talking. I'm saying, first of all, I realize something is wrong with me.
Right.
And two, I'm saying, what happened in the last 3 days that made me feel this way? And Stephen, guess what? I pinpointed what made me feel depressed. A friend of mine, pastor in Macon, Georgia, died at
Mm.
44. And I thought I had processed it. I thought I had dealt with it. And because I
Right.
realized about life, and guess what? I realized I had not totally processed it.
Right.
And it caused me to be depressed. Now, developmentally, I'm able to do that, right?
Right.
But what about children?
Wow.
They can't go through that process. So they manifest it through their behaviors. Some other symptoms. And Stephen, I emailed you something if you want to follow along with me. I'm not sure you got it, but it's sort of like a little cheat sheet we use.
Right. Yes,
But
sir. I have it pulled up.
okay, great. So I'll just say like some of the other things are the kids feel hopeless. They're not wanting to do anything or enjoy anything. That is depression. They also they change their eating patterns. I do want to share that I have another case of a young person. This child was age 8, depressed.
Wow.
Depressed. He was not eating. He was losing weight. Um, Parents knew it was not normal. They didn't know what was going on. Nothing in the family had changed except one conversation. The child overheard.
Mm.
The child overheard that one of the parents had cancer, and they had not talked to him about it.
Wow.
And they talked about death. It was the mom, the dad, and the young lady's mother. And the child overheard the conversation. And so his whole thing was somebody's dying, and he didn't know who. He also assumed all three were dying. So parents, that's why it's important. I'm not saying tell your kids everything, but tell them things developmentally, because they can sense when something's not right in the family. They can sense when things are not right in the family. They also, for depression, they feel a sense of worthlessness. They feel like they're important. And sometimes, Stephen, they begin to self-injure. Now, Stephen, I said to the foster parents, I said that if you get children who are in, don't assume that, oh, they look well, they're playing well, nothing wrong with them.
Yes.
That's the worst thing we could do. we're going to do some assumptions. Going to assume that everything is wrong with them. I'm going to look for depression. I'm going to look for anxiety, along with the other symptoms like oppositional defiant. They have, Stephen. I'm going to look for all those things because I know that child cannot be all well,
Right.
and he's in foster care, or she's in foster care.
And Doc, how about we just living in the times that we're living in? I mean, we saw what just went on politically, and I think we automatically assume that, oh, the children aren't paying attention. You know, they'll be fine. They'll be fine, and they're not fine.
They're not fine. Stephen, it's amazing when you said that because children are able to pick up on the parents' vibes. So I don't know why as parents we think that, oh, they all don't know better. They're too young. Well, Piaget proved that wrong. Piaget is a switch scientist who has a developmental model. He proved it wrong. He said, babies are active learners, and your children are active learners. Stephen, your kids know when something wrong with you without you even telling them.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Doc, you said something right there. And my children know because I hug them all day, every day. If I don't hug them and I'm quiet, they go to their mother and say, what's wrong with Dad? Well, what is he doing? He ain't hugged me. He's been asleep today. Oh, he worked last night, or he was doing something. See, my mood changed the flow of my house.
And the kids know it, Stephen. They know it.
Yes.
The kids know when you're not happy. They know when you're sad. They know when somebody's bothered you. And it sort of frustrates you. You mentioned your children. My son is 35 years old, who is visiting me here in Atlanta, right? I was doing counseling online, and I finished. I went into my dining area to have like a bite to eat. He said, what is wrong with you? He said, your mood has changed. He said, I think what you're doing is you're letting this counseling get to you. And I said, you're right. I said, I violated some boundaries. I allowed it to get to me. And Stephen, what I allowed to get to me, I have a 7-year-old kid male child, who's biracial, who parents just gave up on him, and the grandmother who was older trying to raise him. And dad stays in jail, 7 years old. Every time I see this kid, he sends me hearts, and my heart breaks. Then when the session is over, he says, is it time to go already?
Wow.
My heart breaks.
Wow.
He says, can I call you anytime I want to? My heart breaks. And I don't like seeing kids like that. I just don't like, and I'm a therapist.
Right.
I'm a therapist.
Right.
But I don't like seeing that because I'm saying it does not have to be that way. And it's extra compounded because of COVID.
Right.
He never goes outside. He's not interacting with other kids. And I'm saying, wow, how do I handle this? So I try to make sure I spend quality time with him and try and tell grandma, as she's working now, trying to take care of him. So she ain't got a lot of time to be cuddling. She's trying to do babysitters and all that kind of stuff. So that child is what? He's depressed and anxious.
Right. Hey, Doc, I want to go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about mental health, and it got me thinking about this. If I physically say, man, I'm tired, my back hurts, we don't mind getting help for that and going getting aspirin or making a doctor's appointment. If we say, oh wow, I'm broke, we start thinking about measures that we can do to get money. How is it that when I'm at a deficit in my mental health, why do I think, oh, I need to keep this a secret? Oh, I need to hide this. I think it's rooted in our lack of understanding. And that's why I had to jump on this as soon as I got on. And I love the topic for this entire month is because we don't talk about this.
We don't. And Cindy, you gave a great example. We'll take care of everything else except our mental health, and not realizing our mental health controls everything else.
Oh my, it's the control center. So Doc, go ahead. I had to say,
but no,
that because
I think
it's not
that,
a bad word.
I think it's a great point. And I think what you did also for me, you kind of like tied this together a little bit. What we don't resolve in childhood shall be manifested in adulthood.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So if we don't deal with our children's mental health in childhood, they'll have those same kinds of issues in adulthood. And parents, if you don't believe me, just take a look at yourself. Just take a look at yourself, because you're the exact example of what you were when you were a child. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about? the same anxieties, the same fears, the same not trusting, the same crying at night. The same thing still occurs. So let's take care of it early so we have a great adulthood, a great adulthood. All right, let's deal with some other stuff. I'm moving on. Oh, medications. Parents always want to hear about this. Like, what are the what can we treat them with? can the medication heal them right away?
Right.
And the answer is, folks, we do have medications for children who are experiencing, again, severe anxiety and severe depression. But I want to share with y'all that, and as a mental health advocate, I'm going to share that I don't believe in medicating children or even adults without therapy. The medication and therapy go hand in hand. The medication and therapy goes hand in hand. The medication helps us as a therapist to be able to talk them through situations. And the talk is called cognitive behavioral therapy, which means mind behavior therapy. And many of y'all will see it called CBT. So make sure that, if your children are receiving medication, that they're also getting therapy. And I got to caution you on this. And I've had some trolls on here talking about I'm talking about the profession. I'm just telling y'all the truth. Just like you're very choicy about everything else, you better be very choice about the therapist you choose for your child and your family. All right? They're good and bad doctors. They're good and bad cops. They're good and bad everything. They're also good and bad therapists. All right? For anxiety, which y'all already know this, right? Serotonin reuptake inhibitor. That is one of the primary medications that is given for anxiety, serotonin. And for depression, of course, you're going to have some antidepressants. You're going to have the Prozac, the Zoloft, and the Anafil. You're going to have those three. And those are the most predominant. All right. So, folk, just know that. And again, I'm not trying to make you all doctors. I'm just trying to give you some basic information. As you begin to take a look at the child receiving counseling services with the medication, make sure you understand the role of the licensed person. The licensed person is the person who does the assessment of the child, maybe the first person the child will see. You have a psychiatrist who would then verify the diagnosis and prescribe medication. He or she's the only one who can prescribe. They're licensed psychiatrists. Then you have the therapist. The therapist's role is to make sure that they enforce what's on the treatment plan. Whatever's on the treatment plan, it's their job to do that. All right. So I think we've gotten pretty well through this. I was going to go through some myths about anxiety and depression. Some myths are, people always making up stuff. Oh, well, some anxiety runs in our family. Yeah, right. So fear runs in your family. Oh, depression runs in our family. Now, I'm not making fun of this. Some of it, with depression, some of those things can be caused by, some of your neurotransmitters not connecting. But usually it's out of some fears. It's out of sometimes environmental things. And the key is, parents, just make sure that you ask your children questions, know some of the signs of anxiety and depression. And don't forget now, they go hand in hand. Normally you'll get a diagnosis that says he has anxiety and he's depressed. And or if he has anxiety first, folk, he's going to eventually be depressed. All right. And if he's depressed, he's going to eventually have anxiety if not treated. And so the goal is to get them while they're young. And to catch them while they're young is like, the 5-year-old, 5-6-year-old. But there are children who are as early as 3 who are anxious. And the symptoms, Stephen, they're kind of obvious. The child acts differently. He should be playful. He should be experiencing childhood. He doesn't experience any of those. Stephen, you helped me bring something to focus. I want to bring this up, and that is how do we look at anxiety and depression during these times? Like, for instance, during the COVID times.
Right.
And there are many things that can exacerbate these. For instance, the child's in the house all day. Stephen, a thing that's really, really hurting our children, and my heart hurts for them, is they're having anxiety and depression over virtual learning. Parents are having a fit because the kids' grades are not good. And the children are saying, I can't sit in front of that screen for 4 hours like this. And I don't know how the schools have it organized, but you would think that they would have, like, blocks of time, take an hour break, blocks of time, an hour break. They have some breaks, but those kids are sitting there for 4 hours just looking at a screen, and it just ain't gonna happen.
That is a great point. That's a great point, Dr. Miles, because what my children do is, and we've totally allowed it. They take the computer when it's time to go eat cereal or go get lunch. They have the computer right there with them. It breaks the monotony.
Yes.
And I can say for our school system, they have incorporated physical education into it. So I see my son doing jumping jacks and push-ups, and once it get a little bit warmer, I'm gonna encourage them, take the desk outside.
Yes.
Go put it in the garage. And I mean, just something different to stimulate continuous learning, because they won't be going back. My wife and I have decided that the children won't be going back this year, but there are some things that the parents can do to switch it up.
Well, there are some parents who are just really having a real problem, and it's with the disciplining. Make good grades, everything it takes taken away, but then it causes depression. And so maybe one of our live streams will be on how to work with our kids during COVID, our virtual learning. We did that once before. We didn't get to the details, but I think I want to deal with how it can cause some mental health issues if not dealt with appropriately. Like you said, your schools are actually doing the exercising, which is excellent. But our kids are going to experience social isolation. They're going to experience, they're going to experience, they are experiencing it. Social isolation. They're experiencing anxiety because they're worried about those grades. They're with the depression. They don't see a way out. They're worried about family interactions because nobody understands. Now, this is in lieu of all the other stuff they had before COVID. Poverty. Are you with me?
Oh, yes.
So I'm saying it's important, parents. Again, trust me, I am not trying to get clients. I have a waiting list. But they don't get us. Get help somewhere. Your child needs someone to talk to. He or she needs someone to express their thoughts to, and to let them know what they're going through is not abnormal. They just got to figure out a way to cope through it, and to make it relevant, and to make it fun. And so some of the kids are having fun by learning codes to their platforms and watching TV and some other stuff while they should be in class.
That is correct.
That's how they're coping. So again, Stephen, I'm just really happy that you came on. You helped me out tonight. You don't know it, but you did. Just being in the midst. I do want to open this up for a few minutes for anyone who has any questions. We've been talking all night about depression and anxiety, and those who came on late, I'm Dr. Willie Miles, the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children's Foundation. We ask y'all to also make donations to us. We're tax deductible. We're a 501c3, and we'd like for y'all to actually consider us. This is kind of, I'm not saying it's funny, but as y'all get those checks in, stimulus checks, stimulate us a little bit. Stimulate us a little bit. So
we got you over here, Doc.
Great. You have any questions for me, any of our audience? Ms. McQueen, thank you for being on. You're always here. I think I saw the Taylor family. I think it's Taylor. Let's see. Yeah, David and Joyce. Terrell, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're on. And I want to thank all of you all for tuning in. We are going to be finished for the night, Stephen. I mentioned that on next week, we're dealing with hyperactivity. How do I control it? And do my children need medication? And the week after, we're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorders in children. Right. So again, it's been a great series. Stephen, you have any final words you want to share with us?
Doc, as you were talking, the last thing I thought about is when I go take a physical, there's a little checkbox up there that talks about family history. Mm-hmm. Stop glazing through that little box that say family history and examine your family history.
Love it. I love it. Hey, folks, it's time for us to go. My time is up. I'm about to log out. Hey, Stephen, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Doc.
Thanks,
I always appreciate you, sir.
Most certainly.
Okay.